All righty. Well, Mayor, Commissioners, this is the update of the Housing Steering Committee and the policy work that we've been doing. You recall a couple of years ago, we put the housing policy in place that had about 42 recommendations identified from a variety of working groups and conversations with a broad contingency of stakeholders, citizens, institutional engagement. This work session is to update you on the work that has been achieved to date and to share with you the 2026 activities. And with Emily Crow this morning is also a couple of key partners, and you know them well, but they will also be sharing the work that they are helping to lead that aligns with the Housing Steering Committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily to take this on.
All right, thank you all. I haven't spoken before you all very often, but I'm Emily Crow, the Deputy Director of Planning, Neighborhoods and Development. So I'm happy to be here this morning to talk through kind of what we've been working on with the housing policy. So today, really what I want to be able to share with you is where we are in terms of the policy's implementation and talk to you about the structured coordination model that we're using to make sure that all of our partners remain involved over the implementation, and talk through a little bit of the major initiatives that are currently underway. Basically, last year in 2025, we were kind of in a repositioning year to get the different subcommittees and partners working on things in alignment with what the commission's goals and actions were. So we've got a 12-month work plan laid out for us with the various subcommittees. So I'll just go through the structure. So the steering committee was established, I believe, in 2021, before I joined the city. And this was an initiative that I believe the city recognized a significant need to start developing policies around housing that helped address kind of those gaps in how housing was being provided in the city. But it also reached out to our regional partners as well. That steering committee worked over a period of about 18 months and presented the 42 action strategies that were guided by a series of goals.
I mean, just make one correction because I don't want the historical context confused. Okay, and we know you were here, Emily. So the steering committee was a result of, is an implementation body. The 42 recommendations came out of those 70 plus people that we engaged in this conversation in 3 different committees that were led by, one by the city, one by Ms. DeMassey, and one by, I don't remember, Tory. So there were 3 working committees that those 60 to 70 people filtered into. They spent a year and a half coming up with the 42 recommendations. Part of that policy we brought forward was we need an implementation body to coordinate across these 42 recommendations because, as you know, we don't control all things in housing. And we wanted to make sure there was strong integration and coordination. And so that steering committee was established by the city manager to be able to support the integrated implementation of the 42 recommendations.
Yes, and so then in 23, with the adoption of the policy, that's when the steering committee really
that was when it was formed.
Yes. At that same time, and towards the end of 23 into 24, there were originally 4 subcommittees designed to carry out some of the implementation. And they did meet throughout 24 a couple of times. And then last year, what we realized is we needed to expand that. And so what you see here are the 5 recommended subcommittees for the work plan in 2026. So we still are focusing on data management between the various organizations and making sure that we have access to housing data as we need it to make decisions. We have a capital strategy group, which was formerly titled, I think, the Housing Investment Fund Steering Committee. And they have done quite a lot of work, and we're going to talk about that today. Karen's going to share that with you. We had a group in the past that was looking at the Bowen study that was done in 22, I believe, which looked at housing inventories, different demographic cohorts to see what we needed to do. So we are in the process of updating that Bowen study. So this market conditions group will kind of act as the steering committee for that work and then make recommendations about what we need to be considering in the realm of affordability and market cohorts. One of the things that we added is an outreach and education subcommittee, because there are a lot of programs that are coming out of these efforts, and making sure that both our citizens are aware of how this all will work, as well as sharing all of this information that comes out of this endeavor in a more transparent way. So that group will be working on those things. And then we have what has been the tenant group. We've now kind of rolled that into a rental housing subcommittee so that they can deal with both the conditions as well as the relationships between landlords and tenants. So all of that is kind of guiding how we are looking at implementation. And then underneath that, you have city staff that are participating in all of these endeavors. And we are meeting internally also to make sure that things are moving forward and are coordinated. So for 2026, our work plan focus areas are on kind of 4 classifications. We're looking at the capital infrastructure, building those funds to help support the gaps when you have a public development. And this is we're looking at this on a regional scale. Also, how do we pull in our other programming and financial obligations? We are looking at some significant home repair expansions in 2026. We have been able to implement several home repair programs through our partners, and those are going strong, so we're going to continue focusing there. We have several new rental health initiatives, so looking at abatement of things like lead and or the energy efficiency that Leela and Hoda are going to talk about with the pilot program there. And then we're also continuing our work on our regulatory modernization. So I'm going to share with you some of the accomplishments we've already reached, but we have in the pipeline some permitting and other pre-approved plans, things like that, that will help fast track housing development and building over the next couple of years. So since the adoption of the policy, we have tackled about a third of the action recommendations. We had a classification of governments and implementation. Under that, we did establish the policy steering committee and subcommittees. We have integrated policy actions into the departmental work plans. That's how you're seeing things coming out of the sustainability group, out of P&D, that follow these directions. We have done ongoing reporting in our KPIs on an annual basis since the plan was adopted. And we're working every day to increase the amount of data and indicators and metrics that we can report out on. We've worked on the regulatory process reforms. We've done research into vacancy ordinances, tools, and best practices. We have some potential models that can work here in the city, just looking at how to best implement those. We're looking at different programs and sources Income protections, a lot of these have been research work just because none of this stuff is things that just happen overnight. We have to look at best practices and then work towards implementation to see those changes. But we are starting to see those things. Zoning text amendments, we did a big batch of those last year. You'll recall they kind of worked through during the summer months, and in the fall you were all asked to approve those. Those dealt with things like managing residential densities, height caps, transitions between existing single-family housing and neighborhoods and multifamily developments. We added language in there about accessory dwelling units to give people opportunities to expand more affordable or accessible housing opportunities. We also launched some housing tracker efforts where we're actually collecting data and managing that so that we can report out where new homes have been built, where improvements have been made, and where we're moving the needle on the housing quality. We've also been working on pre-approved infill housing plans to make that a fast track option for smaller developers. We've done quite a lot with the land planning alignment activities, vacant land. We did the transfer of 72 properties to the land bank last year, and those are all set up to receive those infill homes. We have been doing strategic site and housing developments with the Welcome Home Ohio and the Dayton Recovery Plan properties. We've tied investments to adopted neighborhood plans, and we prioritize those CDBG discretional funds for housing pilots, and also combine those with home funds. The Kinship Village is one example of those kinds of endeavors. So you can see here we have done quite a lot of work on the plan since its adoption. We've done data and accountability. We have home ownership and tenant stability initiatives underway. And this is added to things that the city was already doing. Our mediation center has long provided eviction support, and we do things through the clerk of courts and all of those areas where we're really trying to increase the resources available to renters. And this is a little bit of a reminder from last year, but since 2021, we have had over 4,000 total units. We've had 1,800 new units constructed through infill and almost 2,300 rehabbed or preserved residential units. And in that time, we leveraged $767 million towards housing, and we produced these units at all the different income brackets. So now I'd like to share with you a little bit about what the 5 subcommittees are going to be working on this year. So within the data management subcommittee, we're excited to have a new chair for this committee this year, coming to us from the organization Code Dayton, which is a volunteer group that is very much invested in data and coding and trying to help look at problems from a different perspective. So Dave Best is joining us, and we are going to be working this year on inventorying all the different existing data sets that both the city and our partners bring to the table as it relates to housing. And we're going to prioritize those reporting needs. So what do we need to be tracking? What do we need to be able to say when we have to make a decision about where our next housing investments go? We're really trying to establish a strong network of data collaboration. The other thing that we're going to be focusing on is establishing those integrated standard operating procedures to make sure that a program that's run by Dayton Home Repair Network and the DEC will easily integrate with the things that we're doing here at the city and our partners at County Court. We're going to be working to build a data portal specifically about housing. And in the past, if you needed to find out this information, you'd have to go to a variety of websites or sources. There isn't a one-stop shop for people to come and understand what's available in terms of repair programs and or assistance for finding affordable units, things like that. So we're excited to get that portal up and running. And then they'll be reviewing any new programs that come on board to make sure it aligns with our data management needs. In the housing market subcommittee, I did address the fact that we are reigniting the Bowen study for a renewal. And so we'll use that group as the steering committee for that to provide the consultants feedback and direction on what needs to be seen there. We want to have them focus on strategies to protect our inventory of existing affordable units, as well as identifying what we have out there. We want to have that affordability baseline established. So when we talk about the different market segments that we need to target, where are the gaps with the housing that we currently have, and how can we start to strategize about where we start to put incentives or programs in place to help balance out those gaps. We're going to have them analyzing tenure trends, ownership, rentals, things to that nature. And again, kind of the goal here is to prevent any unit loss, but we already know we have gaps. So it's not just about preventing loss. We also want to start rebuilding that inventory and figure out the best way to do that. So the rental housing subcommittee, this one, there have been a lot of ongoing efforts that fall into this group. We have investigated short-term rental registration practices. We've taken that all the way at a staff context. We have looked at that. It is a viable thing to do here. So this group will actually be looking at how do we implement that? And then eventually something will come to commission if it is something that we're going to adopt or want to adopt. Another issue that this group will be looking into is the student housing around UD in terms of how to better manage that. Rental certification is something that has been of interest and is one of the action strategies. So we'll be looking, I think, Bloomberg Group has looked at some models and there are tools out there that are available. So we'll have this group look at those, see if that's something worth implementing here, and do a self-certification framework. And then we also have the energy efficiency pilot program for the tenant landlords. And that will be something else that this group will kind of work through. And so really they'll be looking at evaluating those mechanisms, recommending to the steering committee, and then ultimately to commission any policies or practices that believe need to be adopted, and also overseeing those program launches. The Education and Outreach Subcommittee, which is the newer one, really what we kind of determined is that this is a lot of information for people to process. And we did a little bit of an assessment of what has happened with the Dayton Home Repair Network over the last couple of years, and they've done some great work, but oftentimes there's still confusion between one partner who may actually be doing the contracted work and the city in terms of what permits are necessary, and or what process do you go through to build a new home or fix something that has been a code enforcement issue. So we want to try to do more to grow that information and provide more help to our partners in getting those things taken care of. So parts of that will be, are we putting out information that is helpful to people in ways that is helpful? We're going to work on refining the website content. So right now, if you go to the Dayton housing policy, it's just kind of the archive of what happened in 23 with the adoption. So we've already drafted some preliminary or interim updates, but we're working on like a interactive portal, which will have interactive mapping, links through to other programs, all of that. This group will be leading that effort, expanding those FAQs and resources. And we do have some preliminary things that will be available to everyone shortly. And that's part of why we wanted to do the update today, is so that we can get these things live out there. The other part of this is overseeing the adoption of some pre-approved housing plans. There are example communities like South Bend, Indiana, that have done this successfully. We have been studying it and looking at it over the last year. We are at a point, however, where we need to bring these partners together, and we have to go through a process to actually figure out what those plans are going to be and how do we get that set developed so that we can have kind of a library of plans. And so this group would be overseeing that process and coordinating it. As part of this, we also want to start doing partner workshops. So whether it's getting small home builders together and having a work session where we talk through how do we help you get, if you're going to build 25 new homes and you're going to use 5 models, how can we like get you through that process more quickly? How can we help you do that? And work with them, and then work with our partners at like the Dayton Home Repair Network to understand how to get permits, make everybody more adapted to a process that works for all of us. And then the Housing Investment Fund, and I think I'm going to let Karen take over from here.
Sure. So I want to start just a little bit about citywide and our the fact that we became a CDFI in 2015, just to make sure everybody understands it. This is a designation from Treasury that allows us to assemble capital, apply to NOFAs, to raise funds, work alongside the city and banks, but to bring new resources to the city. So we have, you're all familiar, I'm sure, with some of the small business lending we've done through the CDFI, most recently the First Floor Fund. But we also began to look at housing. So actually, Emily, if you can just go to the timeline, I think this would be most helpful, because some of this obviously was going on while the housing policy was being put together. So in 2021-22 period, we were able to raise 2.2 million, specifically from investors that wanted to invest in creation of affordable housing. And so we wanted to try this to see what we could do. And during that time, there were some significant projects. You're probably familiar with some of them. There were Dayton Century Homes, which were 100 affordable housing homes that could have been lost. It was an out-of-town developer that kind of walked away. We helped with a loan there, which saved those units. CJ McFlynn Manor, you may be familiar with that. That's senior housing preservation again. And then new housing as well, including the Miami Chapel housing, which is the replacement housing for current residents of DeSoto Bass. It's underway right now. We also had some money in kinship. So we started, thinking about, okay, we have this CDFI. How do we do more? And, within the housing space, there are some CDFIs that's all they do is housing lending. And most recently, the Home Flats project in Five Oaks was also a CDFI investment. So as we were doing that, the policy got adopted. One of the recommendations was around, can you create kind of some fund for your region? So we looked at what's Columbus, Cincinnati, what are these other cities doing? And a couple of things we learned is if your city has a fund like that, you're more competitive with the state and federal programs as another source of capital. An investment fund, of course, is debt, and debt has to be paid back. But, you know, we're trying to come in with a loan or a product that is below what the bank would do to close a deal. And so there was a part of that subcommittee that was formed around looking at this, was led by Amy Regal, still is actually, most of you know Amy, she's the head of Ohio, which is a statewide organization for housing and homelessness. And so the first task of the committee that included residents and financial people and realtors was what's our story? Like, what's our pitch? Why do we really need this? Because if we're going to go out and ask for money, we have to have a convincing argument to do that. And so this pitch deck was created, that's what we called it. And we really tied this for the need for affordable housing. There's lots of data, not just the Boeing study, but what Emily mentioned. And then also all the jobs coming to our area, which is great, but where are people going to live? And so in partnership with the Dayton Development Coalition, we were actually able to drill down and say, what does a licensed practical nurse make? And what could she afford to buy or rent? That ended up being very compelling data in terms of the investment community, because people could see a direct connection between the people that we need to staff our companies or our institutions and the availability of the affordability of housing. And so tested that out, came to a consensus on all the wording. And then Citywide was asked, create an investor prospectus, which is basically a document that we would bring to anybody that tried to raise money. And so that is done. We now have a list of, I don't know, probably 25 to 30 financial institutions, organizations, individuals to try to go raise money. And it is an ambitious goal. It is $20 million that we think could produce 1,000 units over the next couple of years. I'm optimistic that we can do this. We all know how much housing we lost during the tornadoes. I think it was more than 1,000. We barely replaced that. And one of the big challenges that I think we've gotten past in some of these conversations is people hear affordable housing and they don't understand what that means. And so there's a lot of negativity around that. But we're trying to normalize the discourse that, you know, this is people that don't know your neighbors and you go to church with, people just need a decent, affordable place to live. So that is kind of where we're at right now. I don't think I have anything to add, but I'm happy to answer.
So I also wanted to highlight another upcoming program, and you should receive quite a bit of information about this program later today. This is the Issue 6 Your Dollar in Your Neighborhood. You all passed this in December. And so we have been working since that time to launch this program. And our partner is County Court as the administrator for this. And we have developed kind of a program management group or board to set the foundation for how we're going to roll this program. And as we stated at the adoption, we are going to target the 4 welcome home neighborhoods of Fairview, Madden Hills, Wolf Creek, and Dayton View Triangle. And we have combined that with our 2025 housing conditions survey. And so we have already hit all of those neighborhoods. So we've completed the survey in these neighborhoods, and we are going to be issuing sometime in the 2nd or 3rd week of March. We will be putting outdoor hangers to those eligible homes and letting them know that there is a portal open for them to come and apply for this program. So as you may recall, this is targeted to people making 80 to 120% of the local AMI, and they have to be homeowners, and those homes have to be in good standing on their mortgages and taxes. And for this pilot round, what we are looking for is about 20 homes that we can test this early concept of eligibility with and see how many applicants we are able to get that can move through this program. And it is a 5-year forgivable loan, up to $30,000 per property. And at the 80 to 120 mark, that it will be a 2-to-1 match. So for every dollar the homeowner brings to the table, we will give them $2. So at a $30,000 loan, they'll be able to do a $45,000 project and have that $30,000 be forgiven over a 5-year period. We're all very excited about this. I think it's going to be a good opportunity for homeowners, and what I'm excited to see is how much response we get where we have the eligibility that we need. Because I think that's going to be one of the things that we'll need to calibrate why it's so important for this to be in a pilot program. So County Board is ready to work with us in terms of like, are there additional accommodations we will need to make, like providing secured financing through a credit union, things to that nature. But we'll find out more as we go through this pilot phase. But we'll get you all some FAQ answers, and there is going to be a press release later today about this so that we actually have some good news to notice for people. But this is one of the things that has come out of this housing policy work. We wouldn't have been here without the guidance that the steering committee and the commission have provided for us on this. So on this one, I wanted to just give you an example of what we're working with. So Leila Klein is going to talk to you about the Bloomberg project.
Morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Along with my colleague Hoda Banda-Amadi and our third teammate, Niani Brown, we are a team that is embedded in the Sustainability Office, working through funding from the Bloomberg Center for Public Interest at Johns Hopkins. And so our focus is on the intersection of equity and energy efficiency, climate resilience kind of space. So we think this is a perfect project for us. Alongside our colleagues in P&D, we're working on another pilot, which is a rental housing home improvement energy efficiency program. The challenge that we face is that though there are a number of partners who do home repair, only one of the partners in the Dayton Home Repair Network can actually serve tenant-occupied units. Understandably, there's queasiness around public funding going to landlords. There's worry about enriching slumlords and things like that. And what we've seen nationally is that most of the rental-focused home energy efficiency programming is for large multifamily, where we know that many Daytonians rent in smaller single-family or smaller multifamily units. So we're designing a program specifically for Dayton, and that will hopefully be a learning pilot. So it'll be an initial pilot that will hopefully help us learn so that we can apply future home repair dollars to improve conditions for tenants. We know that conditions and as well as energy bills for tenants are a really significant problem. We went through a design process to kind of land here, including interviewing landlords as well as kind of landlord advocacy groups. We also did roundtables with tenants to really understand the lived experience of some of the conditions that folks are experiencing in Dayton, as well as meeting with tenant advocates to sort of understand what their perspective is on conditions. And then we looked closely at peer cities. And then we're working with a partner, a national housing quality partner called Elevate, to do some data analysis and really look at at what the rental housing market in Dayton looks like in order to design the pilot. So we're still in the design process. One of the features of the Bloomberg program is that there's an emphasis on co-design. So we're really designing in deep collaboration with a lot of stakeholders and partners. So there's certain decisions that haven't been made because they'll be made in those co-design workshops. But what we do know, the funding for the pilot is coming from AES, from a utility settlement that was negotiated by the city. This is part of the settlement that we're working through granting to some of the Dayton Home Repair Network partners that'll be that's in contracting right now, but we held back a smaller portion to do this pilot. So based on some requirements through AES, as well as kind of the design of the pilot, we know that we'll be doing small repairs on about 10 homes. We're focused on pre-weatherization. So the only partner in the Dayton Home Repair Network that can address rental housing now is MVCAP, Miami Valley Community Action Partnership, and their weatherization program is applicable. So what we're trying to do is identify eligible homes in qualified census tracts that have issues that would defer them, that would prevent them from participating in MVCAP's programming. So we can leverage our funding by addressing those deferral needs and then making them eligible for weatherization. So you kind of get the double bang for your buck. So they'll go through our program first and then MVCAP. Dayton Energy Collaborative will be actually keeping this in-house. Unlike most of the funding that goes to the Dayton Home Repair Network, Dayton Energy Collaborative will actually be doing the direct contracting. And that's so that they can learn. The partners have expressed willingness to look at investment in rental housing, but a little queasiness. So they kind of want to see it be successful first. So that's why we're doing this pilot. We're looking at local small landlords. So we haven't fully defined if that's going to be just regional or state, but we know no out of state landlords in this initial pilot. We know that we will be doing things like working with our partners in housing inspection and in the courts to make sure we're not investing in homes where the landlords are frequent flyers in housing complaints and things like that. We're also working closely with the HRC and the Fair Housing Center to sort of make sure that we're designing with kind of fair but under-resourced landlords in mind. We also know that we want to make this program require both landlord and tenant buy-in. So we want to address conditions that are impacting tenants the most, while also making sure that landlords are willing and active participants. We're going to have at least 2 years of kind of tenant protections once the investment has been made. So it's a smaller investment than issue 6, so a shorter compliance period, but will require no increase in rent above cost for those 2 years, as well as no eviction without just cause or without cause. And right now we're working on the mechanisms that'll ensure that compliance as part of our design process. We plan to be releasing applications for participation this summer with a kind of an extensive pre-contracting period in the fall, because we know that this is new, having to have landlord and tenants both go through some form of contracting process, and both want both parties to also receive some basic education on weatherization and keeping up the repairs, as well as kind of some communication plan between them for like what happens if another repair is needed, how are they going to communicate with each other. And by the end of the year, so we should have the 10 homes under contract, and as soon as the weather allows, then the repairs will happen, probably in early 2027, and then immediately following that, then they'll go through the weatherization process with MVCAP. Our hope really is to learn, especially around the kind of like relationship piece between landlords and tenants. We want to be able to use future utility settlements to enrich and improve tenant conditions and reduce energy bills. And we know that there's some desire to use issue $6 too. So we're hoping what we learn will inform future programs, even though our program is small. We think it can have. I'm happy to answer questions as well.
I have one more update for you all, and then just a little bit of process for you. So I did mention that last year we tackled some updates to the zoning regulations that kind of solved some of the challenges that we had seen in previous approvals or applications. Trying to remove those obstacles to housing creation. So in the upcoming year, we are still going to be working on density modernization, looking at parts of the city where our zoning doesn't quite match exactly what is already built, and trying to do more to get those in between densities back online. I'm going to talk to you all more, I believe, in a month. We have it scheduled right now to do a permitting process update. And so we'll talk to you more about what these projects entail at that time. But again, we really just want to create a clear development pathway for housing. And housing is a little bit different because from a land use and development perspective, once we cross over 4 units in a building, it does kind of get more into the commercial territory, which means it becomes a more complex process. The financing and the capital stacks become more complicated. So again, really focusing on those infill, smaller one-off type of housing improvements, but also considering the fact that if we're doing things like investment funds, we also need to be finding ways to make that planning process, that permitting process as cost effective and efficient as we can. Get those units online quickly. So I did want to give you a little bit of a brief overview of how we see these things rolling out through the steering committee, subcommittees, and then ultimately on to you all for decision. So the way this is set up is the subcommittees will be working with city staff and all of our various partners to develop these ideas, flesh out, do the work, and do research. And then staff will do a feasibility review. We will do the legal and financial vetting here at the city at the staff level, and then ultimately take it back to our steering committee at our quarterly meetings to get an evaluation from them and a recommendation for you all to consider. At that point, we would come forward, whether it's an issue 6 type program, with a briefing for you, and then at that time let you know if we feel like this is going to be something that we actually need adoption of, or if there's a partner that's going to take this on in the future. So what you can expect from us is some program updates, definitely the funding considerations. That's going to be a big topic of conversation this year. The regulatory refinements, and then having the ability to provide you with that annual progress review. I think we can probably plan on doing something maybe 3rd quarter, and then something around this time again next year. So again, just really important for us as the steering committee, as the housing policy, which does tend to live in planning, neighborhoods, and development. Again, how important it is that we have these coordinated partnerships, the transparent communication path, and then sequenced implementation, because none of these things are going to just happen overnight. We all have to do our part and keep things moving, but we really are starting to see some measurable differences because of the efforts that have been taken by this group. So if that's all I have for you this morning, happy to take questions and answer any.
Thank you, Commissioner Beckett.
Yeah, I have a few. First and foremost, just want to congratulate all the excellent work that's been done. I find this very layered. I find it strategic. I find it very thoughtful, based on the comprehensive strategy and approach that we're taking. So I want to start with that and just thank everyone at the table for their hard work. I do have some more pointed, I think, things I want to raise. I went back prior to this work session and just reviewed our recommendations in the housing policy framework. Right? There's a lot in there, and I recognize that this is going to take time, and that it is a large undertaking to operationalize each one of the recommendations that came out of all of this work. There were a few that I am really interested in that I didn't necessarily hear specifically in this that I really would like kind of an update around, right? And that was several recommendations around holding vacant homes accountable. It might have been in here from a high level standpoint, but specifically, right, there's one recommendation in the housing framework specific to really reviewing our registration of fees, right? For property owners that have vacant property in our city. I'm interested in where that's at, right? I think another one was working with Jock Manis's office, county treasurer, right, around what guardrails and guidelines do we have in place, right? What can he do from a taxable standpoint as it relates to negligent property owners? And then last but not least, also, I think there was one in there just around ensuring that existing homeowners can age in place, right? What tools do we have as development is happening around them? So those were just a few that I'm interested in. I did hear that we are moving towards, mapping and assembling, right? Vacant land owned by the city and our partners, right? I'd love to kind of know that and see that. Of course, it's internal, but we certainly like to just know the breadth of that list, right? How much property, how much land are we talking about that is slated for, targeted development, right? Owned by us and our partners. I think and I'll stop there, but I think what would be really helpful for me, and I've mentioned this in meetings with the city manager, because this, right, is so much information, right? And these are excellent programs that are coming online. I think for myself and my colleagues, what would be really great is like a 2-pager, right, at most, right, with, program summaries that we can really speak to out in the community. That would be very useful. Those are all my comments. I appreciate this and excellent work, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. I had 3 comments and 7 questions. And I'm having a Matt Joseph moment here. Because he's like, I remember when we've come so far. And I can remember when I was first elected to the commission, we didn't have a plan for the neighborhoods. We didn't have a plan for housing. And so in less than 8 years, just the enormous lift this has been to really address some of our needs with the development and housing and this broad comprehensive look at it. So the first comment is kudos. Thank you for the hard work, city manager, deputy city manager, citywide. Just amazing work. I think this may be the most exciting moment I've ever had as a city commissioner to see the fruit of all this hard work. So thank you. Thank you for the pre-approved. First comment is thank you for the pre-approved plans. I think that's something that can be a really great tool. And so thank you for that. I'm excited about the Housing Investment Fund and having that as a tool and a resource. And at least my first question, can we get in our presentation on that, you talked about it here, I don't know what the best word is, the snapshots of homeowners, their the income that they have. If we could get that chart. Yeah. I think that was incredibly helpful to help policymakers, community members, people who want to be homeowners, to understand what it takes to become a homeowner, so if we could get that, that'd be great. And the tenure trends, I think Commissioner Beckham talked about, helping people age in place, but we also know that we're facing people who are aging out, and how will that impact homeownership? And then when we had a session with Learn to Earn, I had raised a question. We know anecdotally that there are young families who, when their kids get to age, go to school, they tend to leave the city. Now, that's the narrative in the community. I don't know if that's true. It'd be great to have some data. I asked Learn to Earn if they could help us identify places where we might find that data, track that data, see where we can interrupt that. So I think in terms of tenure trend, that would be really helpful. Aaron, you mentioned like the 100 homes, are those the LIHTC properties? I know we had a strategy of trying to find those LIHTC properties as they roll off and try to.
Right, so you were talking Dayton Century Homes.
Yeah.
That was an out-of-town developer. The affordability period had expired and they were showing up like a single-family sales, which you're not supposed to do. And so Adam Blake from County Corp, Abel got involved, went to the state and said, what's happening here? Because we don't want to lose these units and we also don't want people that are most of them are occupied. So those were working a deal to get control of them. So County Corp now owns them. So we have the responsible party locally whose mission is,
And that's
Sometimes it's been
100. Are there more LIHTC homes inventory that's rolling off?
That is one of the data things that we're looking at is making sure we are aware when is the roll-off period, right? So we just had 33 homes in Fairview through the Phoenix project that were built. They were going to roll off once again. Citywide's like, okay, we want to make sure these end up in responsible hands. So we did work with County Corp on that. And they are working with a number of those families to buy these now, but also to maintain quality rental. People, not everybody wants to buy, but they still, want to stay there. So I think overall, the city's trying to get a handle on all the LIHTC. We have quite a few developments to see if we can get ahead of that roll-off period. So we make sure, they remain.
Thank you for the work that's so smart, so strategic. So thank you. And Ray's talking about Fairview, the purpose-built neighborhood school kind of idea. Is there an update on that?
I am optimistic that we will know more in March, and I will say that it looks very positive. So Purpose Built Community is a national organization that's in and out of Dayton for a number of years. So more to come on that.
I think we talked about the student housing around UD. I know at one point we were kind of looking at student housing with Sinclair. I didn't know if they can do student housing because of the nature of community college, but there was some idea at one point to look at that kind of market for housing. I don't know if that's something on our radar.
That's something that other developers have been looking at and the city's worked with, but not necessarily the housing steering.
I heard a news report this morning, I think it was the city of Hamilton, that is pulling neighbors together to volunteer to do painting, outdoor upgrades. I know Rebuilding Together Dayton does some of that, but I didn't know if there's an opportunity there, thinking about Dayton's strong efforts in the past. Now, if we could find ways to mobilize to have more of those efforts, particularly as we have these, board targeted neighborhoods with the welcome. What's it, the title of this program again? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Welcome Home Ohio. That maybe we could concentrate some volunteer efforts. Because not everyone's going to be able to qualify for those loans, right? We're going to have more applications. There might be some in those applications that a volunteer could come. So I think there's an opportunity there. That we put that. And then the second question was, Commissioner Beckham made me curious. With the sustainability program we had gone through and the 100+ recommendation, we had prioritized them all, kind of put them into a work plan. I didn't know if we'd done that with the 42 recommendations of the housing recommendations. And then if we have some type of tracker like we have with police engagement, then might go to your Beckham's question. Thank you all.
Yeah, I do have one where we have been tracking what's completed, what's in process. It's still very complex, and so that's why I didn't bring it here today, but we are tracking that, like we're moving things as they move from one classification to another so that we can report that. But I think we could do something a little bit more to make it transparent.
I forgot the biggest. You may have heard that I have this dream that we will increase home ownership by 1% every year till we get to national average. So my understanding is correct, we're at 48% home ownership, 52% renters, 65% is the national average. We have a team and looking at outcomes. So I invite you to look at that. 1% might be a bit too ambitious. I think that's like 500, 700 new homeowners a year. So it might be too ambitious. Maybe it needs to be a sort of a smaller percentage. But I think there's a lot of merit in looking at that as the outcome of this work.
Okay, so that was, this is great, information, you know, taking a very, very deep dive. I need to really digest a lot of this. I will have questions, absolute questions in the future. One question I do have, right now though, is the work that Marty Garris is doing with the Rights Council stuff, is that incorporated in this?
Yes. Yeah, so Marty has offered to be our chair of that, this group. It was kind of, we were looking at a need. The previous chair needed to step down, and I had said that, I hear you're doing this, would you be willing to kind of build that into that? So he's agreed to do that.
Okay, so,
So he's the rental housing subcommittee.
oh, I see, okay. Okay, that's really all I have. My colleagues have asked a lot of great questions. I know Mayor will have some questions to do. But I will, after kind of sorting out this, I'm kind of late to the table on this housing conversation, but I do want to take a deeper dive and then reach out to many of you to get some feedback. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I want to first echo my colleagues' comments. Great work. I know this is an extremely heavy lift. Thank you for doing a deep dive and going into it, all of the tenacity and perseverance needed to tackle this this beast, if you will. So again, kudos to all of your efforts. I do have a couple questions. I want to pull on the comments of my colleagues, Commissioner Beckham. He made a very interesting point. So we can and the recommendations too, and defines the registration. We do have a rental registration. We're not pulling on that, and I understand there is some conversation in terms of the auditor's office and some things that preclude us, and we don't want to duplicate our efforts, so on and so forth. But this could potentially be an opportunity for us to do the work that is needed in terms of improving the conditions of our rental housing. So how do we look at that? And also too, is it an opportunity for us to use the fees, if you will, as seed funding or funding to help with rental assistance that may be needed for repairs or whatever have you. Now, it may not be, you know, to get us to that $20 million, right? But it could be something to allow us to get there. And then while I'm talking about speaking on the $20 million goal. So as of right now, from 21 to 2020, I think you had
2.2.
22.
We
So
continue
does that-
to revolve it as it's paid back,
Okay.
then we can put it into something else.
Okay.
These funds are normally, they're revolving funds. So as the projects get paid back, we pay the investor back, we have the money again. And I do want to say, we're not going to wait until we get to 20.
Right.
We're just going to try to raise as much money as we can in the environment we're in and keep going. But I do think it's helpful to have a goal. So, yeah.
So help me, because I will tell you, I am a strong proponent and advocate for a housing trust fund. And in my world, right, I will view the housing trust fund as a means for us to create that fund and that umbrella, if you will, to be able to attack all of these various different tentacles, right? So that there is an opportunity for developers, rental assistance, homeowners assistance. Like, how does that feed into the CDFI affordable housing support, and how do we make that work? Because again, to Commissioner Becker's point, that is one of the housing policy recommendations in the framework.
And it may be that, there's two different vehicles, because this is an investment fund to provide gap financing to developers to either preserve the housing we have or build new affordable housing. And we have to pay these folks back. So it's not grant money per se. What we're trying to do is create a debt product that is more attractive, right? And so citywide, as you probably know, we don't do any consumer lending or anything like that. We're more focused on small business and these kind of developers. So that's the difference, I think. You're talking about trying to, if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about consolidating other resources to fund a number of these things that were discussed today. Is
And
that fair?
having partnerships and being in partnership with others, perhaps, again. Yeah, front of it, but other partnerships to help fund this vehicle. So again, I would just ask that that's something that we will review, a housing trust fund and how is that could be built out to address some of the other various different projects.
So Meredith, we have been trying to show strategic work we've been doing across many of the continuums that I think you talk about when you talk about housing trust fund. And because we've got, you know, the CDBG low mod, we've got the moderate or affordable product in our, you know, issue 6. We've got the strategic partnership with the land bank, who has put all kinds of money into the welcome homes. We've got a housing trust investment. So I think that, you know, and we've been trying to show that continuum of things that we have done, and that, you know, we've got rental housing, weatherization, we've got the right to counsel pilot. So there is all of that work being done. I think, you know, the opportunity, quite honestly, is to take that continuum, that umbrella, that continuum that we are already implementing, and go to state and federal partners to say, can you come alongside us? Because there's a lot of money, resources, and capacity already lined up doing all of that work that you all have already, you know, blessed and, you know, moved us forward on. But, you know, if your outcome you're trying to drive with the Housing Trust Fund is securing more partners, we've tapped into everything regionally. It's really the state, any kind of state elected partnerships or federal, that we need to bring alongside us.
I agree with that, and I have no qualms with that, but there's other opportunities. There are opportunities that we can have with the county. I'll just be very blunt.
Sure.
So with that being said, when we talk about access to counsel, right to counsel, whatever have you, that could potentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're absolutely right, state, federal. But if we do have that mechanism in place, knowing that this is something that the members of our community have advocated for, this is something that we've heard at the state level, whatever have you, what does that look like for us to be able to do all of these various different things that we're doing, but to button it up and to really have that umbrella, to Mrs. Dixon's point, where we can execute all of the various different things that we take that we know that we're doing. Let's put a package on it, right? Let's package it, make it something attractive. And that too can potentially help us with advocating for funding from those other partners, state, federal, whatever. Thank you, Ms. Dixon. And then I'm certainly very excited. This is something that is ongoing to do. So the various different subcommittees, one thing that I would advocate for is that we don't continue to recycle the usual suspects. And I don't mean any slight by that, but I would like to see DTU, Dayton Tennis Union, they need to be involved. Whereas I'm sure Abel's involved in the conversation. I'm sure that this client has done some research and some conversations with DTU and Able, so we can make sure that they are intimately involved.
And they have it with so they would be part of the rental.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
We have put a great deal of attention into diversity of thought, both the subcommittees and the steering committee.
Okay.
And it is, you know, those who have the subject matter expertise and access to resources, as well as, you know, lived experiences and our other partners we can keep bringing to the table.
Great, thank you. And when we talk about pre-approval development projects, if we just make sure that we have safeguards in place, and that we're not just hurrying up and in getting something done out of hate, but that we're very methodical and that we're thoughtful about,
Yeah.
does it fit with the aesthetics of the neighborhood? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Are we addressing the need, not just throwing up stuff? Because we have done that and we're doing it, but being very intentional about having conversations with the existing neighborhood members, the homeowners, and so on and so forth, and not just getting something done because we want to put some more
Yeah.
structures up in
Karen, that's
place.
a good point. You know, one of the, Emily mentioned the one product we're looking at is the South Bend, and
Yes.
but also the Greater Ohio Policy Center put out a pattern book, and so we always kind of morph, because I almost like, sometimes what's happening in other states may not apply based on state regulations, but we're looking at these and then, kind of look, see, does it fit in our community? And then what's the tweak? What can we add on?
And I want to emphasize, this is for single family homes.
Yes.
Plan design.
Yes.
It is not large commercial or multi-unit. It is single family size or designed to the size of lot, to the neighborhood fabric. So that is something that will help us go faster for the single family.
Thank you.
Because
Thank you for raising.
Emily had a point with the large commercials. They stick up with the state regulations, so it's harder. You really can't fast track. We can do things on our end, try to be streamlined, but those commercial ones still have a lot of that oversight and regulation. But we know that there's opportunities around the housing.
Okay, great, thank you. And then to Commissioner Fairchild's point, I know you touched on student housing, but not just looking at the collegiate level, looking at where we are with DPS, our district, right? We have an influx or a large growing unhoused population within our school district. Where are they a part of the conversation? Are they at the table? How do we make sure that we are housing our families, our students? And so I was just encouraged to be a part of the conversation and not just looking at UD housing, but also to Commissioner's point, you have Central State, you have some Wright State students that are still in the Dayton area, as well as St. Clair in the district itself, the school district. And what are those? And just out of curiosity, the capacity. Do our partners have the capacity with the number of these various different, for instance, the home repair revolving loan program, the issue $6. Very happy to see. I know that County Court is the administering the grant writer, excuse me, but do our other partners have the capacity to make sure that there is a decent amount of time in terms of turnaround, the application, the processing, and the actual
Yeah, so
years?
this is, we definitely have the capacity and some of the efforts with the AES funding for the Dayton Energy Coalition are helping us to support that.
Okay.
So we are working with Eileen Hall, which is the Dayton Energy Coalition. They're going to take in the applications. They're going to do all the screening through that organization. And then once they've identified the eligible applicants, they'll be moved to County Court. And then County Court will help manage the actual construction, repair, all of that. So we are within the capacity of our network, but everyone is prepared for this program to come online.
I think Emily had one of the things. You'll notice that they're in that triangle or that pyramid, the bottom was staff. And so I'm really grateful. We have a tremendous staff in P&D and we have tremendous partners in Citywide. Karen has mobilized her staff. So that staff work group, we are bringing, because we realize that
Right.
we need partners. They don't always have. So Karen mobilizing her staff, us using the breadth P&D and the city staff to help support some of those too, because of that concerns.
Great, thank you. And I think my last question, and if I have any others, I'll filter those through 16. I know you mentioned on the last slide, second to the last slide, that there would be an annual progress review. I would just encourage a mid-year review, just so that we can understand and be able to add any recommendations or any things that we're seeing on the ground per se, or that we're hearing. Okay.
Mayor, they talked about third quarter beginning of third quarter. That gets us about mid-year. Development doesn't go that fast. And remember, the steering committee only meets quarterly. So we will probably most likely provide a briefing memo to update you on activities.
That'd be good.
And then every year, about this time of year, we want to make sure we're in front of you to talk about what we've accomplished, what our next work plan is, and be able to get input that way.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, I think that the conversations we have throughout the next year really do lead to what do we do in 27? Because it is really difficult for us to change lanes, because as you can see, it takes us 2 or 3 years sometimes to get some of these really rolling. So that's why it's important we have the conversation and then be able to say, okay, next year, this is how we focus what we do.
Thank you. And then the,
So on top of what City Manager said, although the steering committee meets quarterly, the subcommittees, I leave that to the chair and that team. But like our data committee, I say, was thinking they would probably be meeting twice a month. So anybody watching, I don't want to be like, oh, how are you doing anything quarterly? That's for that broader steering. But all of those working committees are meeting sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's month. So there's a lot of work going on. They bring that up each quarter to the broader steering committee as to what they're achieving, what they're reviewing. So.
Okay. And then if you could give us an update too on those subcommittee, the names, those individuals, subcommittee members. And if we have any recommendations to give us their send their subcommittee to us. And then you said that the press release for issue 6 that will be coming out here soon. Is that right? Okay.
Mayor, I want to be very clear on something, just because this is an implementation group. It's not a public body. And so we shared and got some input in the very beginning after we said these are the primaries and we added rental. So I'm very conscious, because of direction from our law department, that, the commission can't actively appoint, because it's not a public body. We are reporting and being transparent, but this is a working group.
But she's still under our direction. So
It is, the policy
Yes.
has been under our direction. The implementation is under the city manager's direction. And so I just want to make sure we're being very careful about, the public body requirements. And this is because this is implementation and it is under the work of the administration purposely, so that it is not a public body that has to perform, because they have very difficult, very strategic conversations about real estate development, right? So they can't be out in the public body. So that's why that steering committee and those working committees are established with the city manager, so that we don't worry about violating that public body direction. Okay, so I just want to make sure we'll provide those confidentially. But I just want to make sure that there's an understanding as to why we separate.
Yeah, I understand that, but I understand that too. There's other provisions that could be put in place, to your point, right? If there are in fact where there is attorney-client privilege, if there is development agreement.
That doesn't help with the public body description. We've had very clear conversations about this with the law department and taken very clear direction. So we can't use those mechanisms.
We'll talk, because like I said, you're still under the direction of the commission. And
For the policy direction, absolutely.
I understand that, but in terms of what we want to see moving this policy forward, then we should all have the autonomy to do so.
Correct.
We can talk offline, but again, as long as you know and that you fully understand where we are in that.
Sure.
And what I'm saying is that I'm not making sure that we are, in fact, have input in terms of diversity of thought.
Absolutely.
Right.
And like I said, we have been very committed to that and very wedded to that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions or comments? All right, thank you all for all your work. We appreciate it.